Hello, everybody. We are here with our first webinar of the year, Green Buildings, a key element to reach net zero. I'm here with your host, Samuel Baumgartner, as always. And today our guest is David MazairA, a carbon impact specialist. He's not only very much into energy efficiency, he's also just a very efficient person himself. And before we begin, just a reminder that everyone's muted. So if you have a question, please type it into the chat function on the side of the screen and we'll get to it at the end of the webinar. And then a little bit about us at responsAbility. responsAbility has been investing sustainably in emerging markets since 2003. We invest in sustainable food across the entire agricultural value chain, financial inclusion such as microfinance or fintech, and of course, a climate finance like green buildings, like energy efficiency, green lending, and much, much more. So very topical as well for this webinar, we just as a company moved into a green building, and David can share his experience with you on that a little later. And in which case, now it's time to go over to you guys, and I will jump back in at the end for questions. All right, guys, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Stacey, for the introduction. A very warm welcome to you, David. Thank you very much for being here. Also, a very warm welcome to all our listeners. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We have quite a turnout from across the globe, so it's always great to see people from all over. Stacey gave a nice introduction of who we are. Before we get started, we would like to ask you a quick question to get to know you a little bit better. And we would like to know whether you live or you work in a green building. A green building means a building that follows certain sustainable standards, either, for example, in Switzerland, Minergie, or other international or local standards. Whether you work or live in one of these, yes or no, or you don't exactly know. David, any opinions on your side? Any answers?
Yeah, thank you, Samuel. It's something not easy to answer unless you are into the topic. But green buildings are hard to notice actually. So it's not, you cannot tell them from the outside if it's a green building or not. It's something in the design and construction of the building. So let's see if this will also be useful to see what the audience knows.
We've got 80%. I'll give it one more second.
Wonderful. And I think the question might have either been easier or more difficult to answer now that most of us are working from home. And here we go. We've gotten the answers. There's a few of you who don't exactly know whether it is a green building or not. And I think that confirms what David just mentioned, that you can't really see it from the outside, whether it's green or not. There's quite a large number that doesn't live or work in a green building, but we do have about 30% of the listeners who do either live or work. I guess the follow-up question would now be whether it's living or working or maybe both. But without further ado, I think we're gonna jump into the topic. And when we're talking about emissions and drivers of emissions, most of us think about the factories and the chimneys with the black smoke coming out of, or about emissions that are resulting from transportations, be that cars or airplanes and so on. And even actually recently there was an article on the Bitcoin. So for the crypto investors amongst us, is actually one of the currencies that apparently takes up a lot of energy and creates quite a bit of emissions. But today we're going to look at buildings and literally meaning behind the facade. So we're gonna try to find out what makes the difference to reach the 2050 net zero target goals for the climate targets. So David, why buildings? What's the big deal about this?
Yeah, so probably the biggest deal about it is that we spend 90% of our time inside the building. So probably a bit even more during the home office, or probably a bit less if finally the weather is allowing you to go outside, or the measures are softer now in some countries. But 90% of our time, on average, we're inside the building. It could be the office or at home. And everything that helps to construct the building consumes energy and generates emissions. So buildings account almost for 1/3 of the emissions. You can for everything, not only the energy consumption, but also the materials. And then a key driver is also how the population will grow in the next years. So we're expecting to be 10 billion, quite soon. There is an increasing demand for buildings, and there was a quote from the IEA director some years ago that in surface equivalent, as surface like the city of Paris is being built every week, or another estimate says it's a New York surface every month, but anyways, huge. So the demand for buildings will grow, and of course the emissions will grow, hopefully not in parallel, and that's why the building sector is key for the net zero targets.
Okay, so you mentioned construction, the size of New York every month, so it should be relatively easy. You know, we know what the problem is. We're building at record pace. We just built proper buildings. So tell me, where's the problem?
It's half problem, half opportunity, but half of the buildings will still be there in some years. So the buildings are a long-term asset, and so probably 85 or 90% of the buildings that you can see now through your window will be there in 50 years from now. So when the moment when we need to reach a target. So refurbishment of existing buildings is also part of the solution that we need to do. And also, there are other challenges / opportunities that, depending on how you look it on, how to do this at the same time in all economies, with the difference on development. And affordable housing is key, for example, because most of the growing in population will happen in developing economies, and they need to have access to affordable but also green houses.
Okay, we hear different years. We hear 2030, we hear 2050. Recently in a webinar, I've heard about 2040. You know, which one is it?
So the stringent target is a net zero by 2050. That's probably the most common claim everywhere. Intermediate targets just make it more realistic and more and make it bring the challenge closer to us, because maybe this is not that far. We were discussing, I think it was with you some days ago, that for people at our age, 1990 is the same time back that 2050 is on the front. So it's only 30 years left, but having an intermediate target 2030 or 2040 just is to make it more feasible and realistic.
Okay, so that basically helps us putting things a bit more in perspective and keeping an overview of our task lists. Now, going back to the buildings, do you see COVID as a pushback that it makes us more work to do, or do you also see it as an opportunity to reach the net zero targets by 2050 from focus perspectives, but also from a funding perspective?
Of course. So it's for sure an opportunity. There's still a long way to get out of the pandemic, but you need to think that construction sector represents more or less close to 10% of the global workforce. So there is a huge opportunity for job creation, for investments, because we remember that what we said some minutes ago, 50% of buildings are yet to be built. So there is a chance to do it in a proper way. And that has been reflected in budgets. So recovery package from different countries have a strong component on buildings. Just to mention a couple of examples, the UK government is planning to spend £1 billion in refurbishment of public buildings. And if you want to make that amount bigger, the European Union, in the renovation wave and the EU recovery package, they're aiming to spend 270 billion of euros per year only for building energy efficiency. So those are the amounts. And of course, all of that will leverage private investment.
Interesting. So there is definitely an opportunity, and you've just mentioned that some of this money is targeted at refurbishing. We've initially had a quick look at the new buildings being built, and you know, I guess in comparison to the existing buildings, that's an easier problem to solve in that way. But what should we do with the existing buildings? Like you mentioned, they still have a lifetime of maybe 20 to 50 years. How do we deal with the existing 50% that is already around?
Yeah, actually, with current technology and current standards, is possible to reduce a lot the consumption of buildings. Net zero is something a bit different that we can discuss that later, but to reach net zero, you need to reduce as much as possible your energy consumption, then as much as you can procure renewable energy as a source of energy, and then you can offset or compensate the rest with carbon offsets. So in that moment, is when you're neutral, or you can claim your net zero. that's what can you do with the existing buildings, and could be, it's tricky because you can say that tearing down an existing building and building a new building could be up to 40% more costly than renovate an existing building and make it energy efficiency with current standards. And you can really do nice things. There are several types of technologies that you can implement in existing buildings, and with cheap solutions you can have quick gains.
Could you maybe give us one or two examples of these easy, quick gains?
Yeah, of course. And I will always say, say this at the beginning of the webinar. So energy efficiency is number one. How you live and how you use your home or your building or your office is key. So a quick example, like now that we should be switching down our heaters in Europe. So 1 degree of extra heating could be 5% more utility cost per month, and that's an easy one. It's also reflecting on your bills every month. Switching to LED lights, I hope that that's already done. Not everywhere we see that is not common, but that you can quickly switch to LED for a reasonable price. Bit more investment, replace your windows. Any leak of entrance of air is source for energy waste. And of course, how you use and the type of home appliance you own. Those are quick gains.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So I mean, this also gives a good example because some of the initiatives or some of the tasks fall obviously on the real estate owners. That especially whoever rents an apartment or a house has a limited impact directly on the real estate itself. But things like changing to LED lamps, reducing heating, so next time you have cold feet, put on a sweater rather than turning up the heat, is definitely things that we can do on our own. So when going forward, we would like to know also from you what can we invest in. So we've looked at the grand scheme of the building. We've looked at some of the behavioral changes. If I was looking for something to invest in, where could I look for that?
I think actually we have a question for the audience on that. Maybe it's better if we ask them first.
Yeah, sure. Then let's pull up the poll question for the audience. If you would invest into something, what would it be? Energy efficiency. So this is as David mentioned before. How can we use the existing energy more efficiently? On-site renewable energy. This is looking at the source of energy to make that renewable. Manufacturers of energy efficient components for buildings. So correct me if I get this one wrong, David, but I believe this is also things like how to insulate the building, better windows, but also electric components, etc. And then the last one, green building construction as a whole. Here we're looking in general as a real estate development. Sorry. Do you have a preference on those, David?
Let's see the answers first.
Yeah. People are thinking about this one. They're taking a minute, so we'll give them 10 to 15 more seconds to vote.
So most of the people, interestingly enough, would like to invest in real estate as a whole. I guess this also covers maybe if you buy your own apartment or your own house. What's your take on this, David?
Yeah, of course. If you think about the point of view of the owner of the house, if it's an individual, it's a good investment because on the long term, the OPEX or the utility costs will be quite low if you're living on a green building. If you're looking from the point of view of the landlord or the owner of multiple buildings, it's also a good choice. Actually, there are some evidence actually it would be great if we have more, but we have some studies that reflects that the default rate of mortgage loans of people that live in green buildings is lower than the standard buildings. So either because people have more income due to the savings in the utilities, or just that whole ecosystem makes it better for us from both sides, from tenants and from owners. So it's a good choice. And at the end, it's just mixing up the other three. So you contribute to everything, to energy efficiency. You help companies that are in that front, and probably you need some renewable energy there too.
So
Good answer.
definitely a healthy mix is the right way to go forward in as much as we can, right?
Yeah, we have a. Maybe we can mention some examples. We have through in our portfolios. We have all the four of them. We have we provide loans in emerging markets for people that want to do energy efficiency measures in their homes. Small scale renewable energy, not only for residential but also for commercial and industrial, is a quite growing sector. We have also loans to manufacturers and distributors of heat pumps, insulation, windows, all the things you mentioned before. And we have also on the green building sector, we have not only the investment, but we also provide capacity building on financial institutions on those concepts that I mentioned before. So the default rate of mortgage in green buildings, how to assess if it's a green building or not, and certification schemes. So there, it's all those four options are also across our investment universe.
Okay, very good. And I would like to take the opportunity of having you here as well. Stacy mentioned in the introduction, we've just recently moved into a new building, and I think also maybe for our listeners it'd be interesting. Having moved into a new building, we're not net zero with our office space at the moment. Could you explain to us why and also what we're doing about this?
Correct. So responsAbility is a carbon neutral company. So everything that we cannot reduce, we still offset through carbon offset projects, and we can discuss a bit later. But the good thing about the new office is what we have been mentioning across this webinar. So we decided for a location in which the design of the building is quite energy efficiency. We're talking about 80% of reduction compared to the previous office. Actually, the city of Zurich provides 100% renewable energy, but that energy is used in an efficient manner because we also take advantage of the lake of Zurich and the river, and there is a heat pump that using water from the lake also reduces the amount of energy that is necessary to heat and cool the building. So it's both for heating and cooling. I don't know if you have the chance to be in the offices, but the windows are closed. You cannot open the windows. There is also a indoor air quality management. This is quite important in the hopefully post-COVID era, because indoor air quality is also helpful to avoid the transmission of viruses. And yeah, it's not new technology, as I mentioned before. For people that think that this is quite advanced, so actually the first heat pump in Zurich was installed almost 100 years ago in the city hall, using the water from the river. So it's there from some time. Okay,
so we reduced by 80% our footprint, but we're not at zero yet. So what do we do with the rest? And I think this is also something our listeners might be interested in. I think not everybody has the opportunity, or most of us don't have the opportunity to go completely net zero by action. How can we make the last mile to that extent?
Right. The typical solution is to invest into carbon offset projects. Through one of our partners, we provide funds to a project of forest conservation in Congo. The whole voluntary market of carbon offsets is being revised right now, and there is plenty of conversations in the media. And actually this year with COP26 and at the end of the year, there are plenty of intermediate events touching that point. But that's a typical way. There are several marketplace or service providers that can offer you a variety of projects to offset. What you need to be clear is that projects need to be additional. So really prove that you're reducing or avoiding emissions or capturing. Now there is close to Zurich, we have also the direct air capture of CO2, which is a very innovative solution. And you can also go visit them and offset your emissions through that website.
Okay, very interesting. So before we wrap up and we move to the Q&A, what are your, let's say, 3 key takeaways that you would give our listeners around green buildings and how to go about this?
Yeah, so the first one, energy efficiency. Again, number 1, always think what you can avoid consuming. That's a number 1 for everything, not only for buildings. And number 1 for climate change mitigation. 2, think about what can you do investing in your building, or how you can contribute investing outside, supporting companies, or next time you want to buy a new house, think about that when you're looking for your next, hopefully, holiday after COVID. There are some hotels and places you can stay that also are on a green building. And yeah, the climate action is quite important. So where probably through Samuel, we can discuss later with you our investment opportunities also in the green buildings space.
Sure. And I think my final takeaway from you as well is whatever you can't offset by action, you should seek an appropriate way in the form of carbon certificate to do the extra mile. And with it, I would like to thank you, David, very much for participating, and I would like to open the floor for questions and answers to our audience.
Thank you so much.
All right. I have a question here directly about your last topic, which is the carbon offsets. How can I make sure I use the right service to offset? It's a long one, sorry. Are the airlines really doing enough? Can I be sure? What's the difference between and how can I know it's an immediate offset versus 10 to 20 years from now? That's your long question. I think you'll have a long answer.
Now, try to keep it short. So projects related to forestry, for example, which is quite typical on that long term that you're probably thinking about, is something you need to take into account. So you're reducing those emissions or capturing those emissions in the time the tree grows. So that's probably in the long term. There are some airlines, and Swiss Airlines is one of them, that you can provide offsets also through biofuels. And you can see the magnitude of the investment you need to do to offset. That is probably will cost the same as your flight if you want to use the equivalent of renewable fuel in your plane. And that also shows the consumer how expensive it is right now to do an offset immediately. But again, the best thing is to have less to offset. So try to either use a different way of transportation or be more efficient.
Perfect.
Another question. There was a second part, sorry, just on the quality of the certificates.
Yes.
Yeah, there are several standards, but probably it's a topic for another whole webinar. But and it's actually on the change. But then there are few standards. We cannot, of course, mention all of them that assure the quality and the additionality of the credits. So just check for those two terms.
Okay, send us an email in the future if you guys want to know more details there. Another question, how do we tackle the transition to energy efficiency for working class communities that may not be able to afford new technologies or aren't aware of the grants that exist?
Awareness raising is a key topic. Actually, we were discussing with a partner in sub-Saharan Africa. So we are asset managers, so we provide finance through financial institutions and companies. And from our point of view, the lack of awareness is from the financial side of the products like ours. But there were developers and architects, and I say, what is happening that our developers, the end user of our developments, of our buildings, don't have access to finance. They say, come on. So it's probably large value chain. There are funds. It's possible. Actually, it's a company called Reality in the UK. They designed an affordable house unit in Nigeria for less than $10,000, which is really affordable for the low middle income class. So it's possible. And awareness raising is a key issue. There are plenty of resources. We share some readings in a handout, and that probably Stacy knows better than me, where you can see more about this. And standards and labels and certificates also give a sense on when a building is green. That's also
yes, that was a good point. There's handouts on the right-hand side. If you you can download them to get some more information there. I have another question here for you now. How can landlords be incentivized to make energy efficient upgrades to their properties that will benefit their tenants?
Long discussion. Also, we have been part of some studies here in Zurich, especially for houses that still use diesel and gas oil boilers, which is one source of emissions. And probably there are two ways of do that. Regulation through carbon tax, for example. So some countries in Europe are increasing the carbon tax, so it's probably a stick, not a carrot. And if you want to know the carrot, it's probably the tenants awareness. So there it's an issue of offer and demand, but that tenants may look for houses that offer green solutions instead of the old ones, and probably comfort. If you have a competitive market, there are probably options with more comfort than the old ones with old windows and old boiler. But it doesn't happen everywhere. It's something that is probably changing, and regulation plays a key part here.
Are rents higher in green buildings, David?
No.
No.
Some, in average, no. Some developers may use the green attribute to increase a bit the rent, but we have seen also lower insurance costs, for example. And in those cases where the rent is a bit higher, the utility cost compensates that extra rent. That's probably the typical case is that one.
Perfect. Another question, are big cities that are also very old, such as London, really able to transition and meet these targets by 2050?
Hopefully, yes. Fingers crossed on that. So technology allows it. I've seen some very interesting works on renovation that even keeping, because of also landscape regulations and protection of old buildings that are part of the heritage of the city. So they need to protect this infrastructure and still be green on the inside. And this is something we maybe good to close because it was the opening. So you cannot tell the building is green from the outside. So there is plenty of engineering and architect solutions to make the building green, and it's possible. It's just again with the renovation wave in the EU and all the support from the governments and adequate policies. It's probably we're on the good way.
And next question. Do you think that 2050 is a bit too far into the future? Shouldn't we be more aggressive in our goals?
As I was saying, it's only 29 years now. Actually, there is a plenty, and probably some friends are watching this will laugh a lot. There are plenty of documentaries about Britney right now in the media. So, and we're talking about 30 years back. So it's not that far. It's not that far. And again, those intermediate targets are good. So targets in 2030, 2040, and 2050, just make it more realistic. Yeah, it's there. It's there. And only, for example, 9 years for the SDGs. That you can watch previous webinars with Samuel and our colleagues on the SDGs.
All right, I don't see any further questions coming in, and we are coming to the end of our time in any case. So thank you everyone for attending. Again, please download the handouts on the right-hand side in the handout section. And and then remember to follow us on LinkedIn if you want to attend further webinars, and feel free to always reach out to Samuel with any more questions that you might have about anything. All right, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.